Fox News alert, Charlie Kirk's alleged assassin, Tyler Robinson, is back in court. Today, we're finally getting to hear from Robinson's trans lover, Lance Twiggs. According to Twiggs, Robinson never talked about Charlie Kirk.
Did you and he ever talk about politics?
He did more than me. I don't really keep up with politics very much. He'd usually talk about stuff he heard on the radio.
What about Charlie Kirk? Did you ever talk about Charlie Kirk?
I personally had never heard him talk about Charlie Kirk before specifically.
Twiggs claims Robinson was a political hermit with a mild case of TDS.
How about political issues? So did you ever talk about gender identity issues and LGBTQ rights?
No, not really. Usually if he did talk about politics stuff, it was relating to Trump or current policies being issued or voted on.
So the gay guy in a trans relationship never talked about LGBT stuff or Charlie Kirk. That's weird. Just like your boyfriend engraving bullets.
Was he engraving bullets before this?
Yeah, I don't remember exactly when, but he had said he was planning to go hunting with his family, and he asked me for if we had a Dremel because he said he wanted to engrave messages on bullets, and I just told him where our Dremel was and told him to make sure he doesn't set off a bullet on accident in the house, but I didn't really think about it until then.
And now, unsealed texts between Twiggs and Robinson reveal the very moment Robinson allegedly admitted that he murdered Kirk. Quote, "You weren't the one who did it, right?" "I am. I'm sorry." "I thought they caught the person." "No, they grabbed some crazy old dude." "Why?" "Why did I do it?" "Yeah. I had enough of his hatred. Some hate can't be negotiated out. If I am able to grab my rifle unseen, I will have left no evidence." End quote. The next day, Twiggs confronted Robinson about the texts.
Did he talk about what he had done?
Didn't go into detail. I just asked him in person if what he said was true the night before, and he said it was. He started crying a little bit and said he wishes he hadn't done it.
Prosecutors are revealing more evidence that links Robinson to Charlie Kirk's assassination. Investigators say they found the murder weapon wrapped in a towel in nearby woods, as well as a screwdriver on the roof of the building where Robinson allegedly took the shot. FBI analyst Amanda Baker says the DNA found on the towel and the tool came from two sources, Robinson and Twiggs. This all comes as new video was released showing Robinson limping on campus the day of the shooting. It's believed that Robinson's limp was because of the gun or possible gun parts hiding in his pants. This new video appears to debunk wild internet conspiracy theory that Robinson was never on the campus the day of the shooting. Now prosecutors have 1 day left to provide more evidence to convince the court that Tyler Robinson should be tried for Charlie Kirk's assassination. If the judge finds probable cause, the case moves toward a full criminal trial, which could end with the death penalty. Executive Vice President of the Trump Organization, Donald Trump Jr. joins us now. Thank you for joining us, Don. You were a longtime true friend of Charlie Kirk. In the 10 months since his assassination, the internet has been flooded with people, many of whom claiming to be his friend, who have stirred up these conspiracy theories, everything from Tyler Robinson was never on campus to Tyler Robinson never turned himself in, to suddenly becoming ballistics experts about the Springfield 30-06 round. You were in the hearing this week. Tell us what you learned about what happened on September 10th, 2025 at Utah State University.
Well, listen, Charlie, having been in the room now, and I've been pretty quiet for most of this time. I did a lot of press right after Charlie was killed, because Erica, the family, Turning Point asked me to do that. Everyone else started jumping on the bandwagon. I wasn't going to do any of it. But, they wanted people who were actually his friends, not just people looking for the sort of clicks to do that. So, and then I went pretty quiet because honestly, there was so much noise out there. You didn't really realize what was or what wasn't. I mean, there were so many things that were, as far as people were concerned, were the gospel that, strangely enough, haven't even been brought up in the case, probably because they weren't. And so I stayed silent because I want actual justice for Charlie. The way to honor his legacy is to actually find who did this. And honestly, based on everything that I saw in that courtroom, it's very clear to me that Tyler Robinson did this. I mean, you have a kid that, drove 4.5 hours away from where he lived to visit a university campus that he did not go to. He visited the campus 4 times. You can see that very clearly on the video. One of those times, at 12:30 at night, you see him change clothes from, wearing shorts and a T-shirt to wearing long pants and baggy things, going up to a rooftop where they showed us literal pictures of indentations where, someone would be lying down prone to shoot a rifle. You have a screwdriver that likely could have been used to take apart the gun because it had the DNA of the shooter and his boyfriend on it, but mostly Tyler Robinson. And so it's pretty clear to me that he was there, he was scoping it out. He then went back, put on clothes that could perhaps hide a rifle or a taken down rifle. If you took the stock, and the, barreled action apart, you could conceal that in your pants much more easily. He's walking with this strange limp. And then the second the shot's fired, they see him, jumping off the roof. The limp is gone and he's holding a long, dark object, like a rifle wrapped up in something. Between that, the DNA evidence, the fact that, minor details, like he turned himself in, and I believe his parents identified him in the video. To me, it puts so much of this at rest. Then more importantly, listening to the defense essentially try to eliminate any kind of evidence to go in there. I mean, it's almost like, well, that would be really prejudicial. It's like, yeah, because you have him on video doing exactly what everyone believes him to have done. Yeah, that's prejudicial because it's very clear to me that he is guilty. And so, I wanted to be quiet for a long time, and I was, because I wanted to see what actually happened. And I don't think anyone, can't say that I don't have my conspiracy theory bona fides out there. I've seen plenty of them. I've been a victim of many of them. I've seen that, but because of this, because of the gravity, I wanted to see what actually was there, what the actual evidence. And to me, this stuff is very cut and dry at this point.
So, are there any big questions that you went into into this preliminary hearing with that prosecutors were not able to answer?
Well, listen, I think the prosecutors did a great job doing that. I mean, frankly, the biggest question in my mind at this point, Charlie, is not whether Tyler Robinson did this or if it was, some, people from a foreign land or another planet. It was, why were there only 6 police officers active at a major event on a university campus? I mean, that to me seems like something that should have been done. Apparently, from the officer that was testifying seemed quite competent as an officer, very competent as a witness. But the fact that there were only 6 people there, that there was no briefing prior to an event. I mean, these are big events. I've done 100 of them with Charlie Kirk on college campuses all over the place. These are big events that draw thousands of people. That there wasn't an all hands on deck kind of operation to prevent this very thing from happening. Is truly scary. You then get into the details of, this guy and his views, on transgenderism and what that meant relative to Charlie's views. And you start saying, I mean, it's about as clear cut as it can get to me.
I almost hate to ask the question, but I think it's really important because I don't want to give any attention to these people who all they want is attention. Why do you think so many of these people are spinning these baseless theories online about Charlie Kirk's murder?
Well, listen, I think there's different things. I mean, there's people that, frankly, and perhaps in some cases rightfully so, feel like they've been misled for a long time about a lot of things. It turns out they were right. I mean, I was canceled for saying, hey guys, like the Wuhan lab leak probably came from the lab that studied the exact virus in question at the ground zero of where the virus broke out. No, Don. You're not a virologist. How dare you opine on something like this? Like, you don't have to be a virologist. You just have to be not an imbecile. So, you have those, and then you have other people that, I imagine are doing it for clicks, and, they've either tried to monetize this or otherwise. So, I'm not going to give credence either way. I know many people, frankly, on both sides of that. It's, the movement, I think it's really coming together now that before 6 months ago, it would have been probably 50-50. Now it's probably a 90-10 issue where people are saying, okay, this is very clearly what happened. But I understand a lot of people why they'd be skeptical about anything that they've been told as of late. But for me, as someone who is a big skeptic on a lot of things, who's called it out for a long period of time, I was there. I don't believe that literally every officer is in on this. I don't believe that. My lying eyes were telling me the video is different. I don't believe someone would turn themselves in and their parents would bring them there if they weren't a part of it. And you back that up with the other evidence of, that person's, both religious and political views, his views on transgenderism and the violence that we've seen from so many people affiliated with that community over the last few years. It became very cut and dry to me. And again, the stuff I saw, the videos I saw, the evidence I saw, that's not stuff that's been in the public domain. And I think that was difficult for a lot of people. There's so much noise, it's hard to tell what is fact, what is fiction. In court, we saw the facts laid out very eloquently. It took a long period of time to get it out there. But once you see it, you put the picture together. Let's just say this is, to me, again, way beyond a reasonable doubt.
Well, it's because you are a skeptic that you have a lot of credibility on this, and we appreciate you taking an honest look at it, and we appreciate you coming on and explaining it to us. Thank you, Don.
My pleasure, Charlie. Thank you.
Be sure to like and subscribe for all the Fox News latest on YouTube, and catch full shows streaming now on Fox One.